Hey everyone. So today we're going to connect some dots. We're looking at a few recent, really big events that, when you piece them all together, show a massive strategic shift in how India is dealing with the world and even with itself. We're talking about a whole new playbook coming into focus, from national security to global trade and even domestic policy.
And it really kicks off with this. This quote, reportedly from a senior official after a recent cross-border operation, is, well, it's not just tough talk. This signals a fundamental change in India's security policy, a real departure from decades of what you might call strategic restraint.
So what really changed here? This isn't just a one-off reaction to a single event. What we're seeing is the unveiling of a brand new doctrine, one that basically rewrites the rules of engagement for a new era. So let's break down what that actually looks like.
Okay, first up, let's get into the security doctrine, because honestly, this is the most dramatic part of the whole shift. The new playbook is all about moving from a position of restraint to one of retaliation, and it's built on three pretty solid pillars that completely reshape how India responds to threats.
So, these three pillars together, they really formalize a move from a passive stance to a much more active one. Decisive retaliation basically means India now feels it has the right to go after terrorist headquarters, not just skirmish at the border. The second one, no tolerance for nuclear blackmail, directly confronts this long-standing tactic used by adversaries. And the last one is absolutely crucial, making no distinction between terrorists and their state sponsors, while that just erases any room for plausible deniability.
And this slide just illustrates the core change perfectly. The old playbook, deterrence by denial, was all about making your defenses so strong that an attack just wouldn't work. You can think of it like building an impenetrable fortress. But the new playbook, deterrence by punishment, says something totally different. It says, if you attack us, the price we will make you pay in return is going to be so high, you won't even think about trying it again. It's a massive shift from a defensive game to a much more offensive one.
Okay, so this new assertive stance is pretty clear on the security front, but is it happening anywhere else? Is this same attitude showing up in things like trade and diplomacy? Let's take a look at how this new global playbook is playing out on the world stage.
So yeah, beyond its borders, we're seeing the exact same theme. This new global playbook is all about a more confident, more hard-nosed approach to its economic and diplomatic relationships. It's really about prioritizing clear national interest over the kind of ambiguity we might have seen in the past.
And a perfect example of this is the free trade agreement that was just finalized with the UK. After years of really tough, drawn-out negotiations, India locked in a deal where around 99% of its exports will get zero-duty access to the British market. This wasn't some quick compromise. It was a long, hard-fought negotiation to get a very specific, high-value result.
But this assertiveness isn't just about cutting deals. India is also getting much more vocal when it comes to challenging actions that it feels undermine its strategic interests. You can see this in its public criticism of Turkey's support for Pakistan and in its moves to counter the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which it sees as a direct threat to its regional security, especially now that CPEC is expanding into Afghanistan.
So this strategic pivot isn't just about how India deals with the rest of the world. That same assertive, data-driven mindset is also being turned inward to try and tackle some of the country's most complicated and, frankly, oldest domestic issues.
And this new inward-looking approach is just perfectly captured by one single, monumental decision related to the national census. It really shows a new willingness to tackle historically sensitive topics head-on and to use data as the main tool to do it.
And here it is. This is a huge deal. For the first time since independence, the government is planning a detailed count of caste across the entire country. This goes way beyond just counting scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, what you'll often see abbreviated as SCs and STs, to create a truly comprehensive nationwide database of all caste groups.
And of course, a decision this massive is incredibly controversial. The debate is really intense. On one side, supporters argue that this data is absolutely essential for evidence-based policymaking, that it will allow for better targeted welfare programs and fulfill a constitutional mandate. But on the other side, critics are raising some very valid concerns about things like data errors, privacy, and the real risk that it could just pour fuel on the fire of caste-based politics. We're not just talking about numbers here. This is about potentially reshaping how state benefits are handed out, and that could affect hundreds of millions of people.
So let's step back for a second. When we connect all these dots, the new security doctrine, the tougher trade deals, the data-driven domestic policies, what's the big takeaway? What does this all really add up to?
Well, the common thread that runs through all of this is a very clear and very deliberate strategic shift. These aren't just a bunch of separate, random events. It's a unified move toward a much more assertive, data-driven, and decisive national posture.
When it comes to security, the key takeaway is simple. The old doctrine of strategic restraint is out. The new default is proactive deterrence, and it's backed by a very credible threat of punishment.
On the world stage, what this translates to is a new kind of confidence. India is fighting harder at the negotiating table, and it's drawing much clearer red lines to define and protect its national interests. And back at home, it marks a shift toward a more assertive, data-driven approach to governing. India is basically betting that having comprehensive data can help it solve some of its most complex and historically sensitive social challenges. This whole strategic pivot is bold. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But it also invites new challenges and pushes the country into completely uncharted territory. And that leaves us with a really critical question for the future. India has drawn its new line in the sand, but what happens when the world inevitably decides to push back?